A very big blow has been dealt to Russia from Ukraine went crazy. After this move, Ukraine has completely cut off the connection between Russia and Belarus with the ingenious operation it has organized. When this bridge was blown up, the Kremlin issued a red alert. Operation Spring, known as Operational Revenge, has fallen into the water. In response to this situation, the Russian army has launched a massive counterattack. The superiority of Ukraine has been on the agenda for a long time in the Russian-Ukrainian war. The policies that Russia has been following recently ensure that it cannot form an alliance with any state. This situation manifests itself in the opposite way for Ukraine's recent, extremely active actions in foreign policy, and its priority over Russia are also greatly appreciated around the world. But with this latest operation by Ukraine, the connection with Russia's only has also been completely cut off. Since the Ukrainian army has a successful administration, it has started to achieve success in a very serious way as a result of the correct attacks it has made in critical and strategic region. Since this situation shows Putin's incompetence to the whole world, the Russian army has become unable to fight anymore. Although it was quite successful in terms of the army and qualifications, the Russian army continued to be wasted due to the wrong and one-man methods of management. The latest operation has proved it once. Russia, whose intelligence has been great to weaken, it has now been directly affected by many operations by its inability to detect Ukrainian agents. This situation has shown everyone that a big blow to Russia will happen very soon. Ukraine began to make very ambitious moves from the very beginning of the war. This situation paved the way for the Ukrainian army to conduct very large operations against Russia. In Italy, the Ukrainian army's attack on the Kerch Bridge, which provides the connection between Crimea and Russia, resonated all over the world as the reason for this operation. The Ukrainian army has always said that Crimea is Ukrainian territory. This situation was in the nature of proving to us how difficult the war would be from that time on. The Ukrainian army had in Italy stated that it would have a multi-project war against any country elite with Russia. After all, Ukraine's move made Belarus regret forming an alliance with Russia. A bridge located between Belarus and Russia owed Russia to easily provide ammunition support to Belarus. This allowed for the spring operation, which has been on the agenda recently. Ukraine has taken action to make very big move against Russia because it knows the consequences of these operations. The Ukrainian army has mobilized all its ammunition and equipment so that this explosion could be one of the largest explosions that Ukraine has made since the Kerch. After Ukraine blew up the bridge between them and Belarus, it decided to send flag deckers to collect intelligence in the geography where a 10th atmosphere thanks to the mate sent by Israel intelligence. It was already known that there was a very serious storage of ammunition and military equipment in this area. But since it's not possible for Ukraine to enter this region, blowing up the bridge coming from Russia to this region will have prevented this problem by completely destroying the route. The Ukrainian army has taken action to evaluate this intelligence very seriously. Ukraine first considered placing sea force at the feet of the breach to blow up the breach, but it was quite possible that this plan will be detected. The other idea was to send trucks loaded with explosives as at the Kerch breach, but it was also not possible to do this because the Russian army increased its control in this regions. At that time, an unusual idea came to the mind of the Ukrainian army. He would carry out a light attack on a nearby headquarters, which will completely blow up the bridge while mobilizing the Russian. The Ukrainian army first determines the coordinates of the nearby military headquarters. Using these coordinates, Ukrainian soldiers to action in order for Daesh to be an attack without casualties. Ukraine's two most successful special forces were made. One of these groups would carry out a simple attack on the headquarters while the other group will place the bombs at the feet of the breach. The Ukrainian army has moved to implement the plan thanks to the launch of HIMS and long-range Patriots to another nearby military headquarters. The Russian army was surprised at what it suffered, along with the attack on the other headquarters. A red alert was issued. The Russian army, realizing this, the Ukrainian army took action from the air. The special forces had very little time. Their remote control that C-force were installed at the foot of the breach. These were such powerful, explosive that Russia will be too damaged to build a new bridge here for some time. Ukrainian special forces have started flying towards this area. Paratroops who jumped down from the plane stood nearby and waited for the Ians to land. Immediately after this incident, something was noticed. After the bombs were attached to the legs of the breach, the Russian army was moving to this region with another convoy. This could help put to operation at risk. Realizing this, the Ukrainian soldiers took action to blow up the breach. When the convoy of the Russian army was halfway across the bridge, the Ukrainian soldiers pressed the button with the blowing up off the breach. Half of the canoe was left on land and half on the bottom of the seat. He could not see the Ukrainian soldiers nearby because this situation panicked the Russian. Immediately after this incident, the Russian army launched a large-scale sweep of the region, but special forces had already crossed into areas where there was no fighting in this successful operation. The headquarters of the Russian army was also unable to send support to this region because it suffered very serious damage. When things got complicated for the Russian military, Putin was very angry when he received the news. He held an emergency meeting at the Kremlin after this meeting. Putin sent a very serious army over Ukraine. The army, which was on its way to Bakhmut, was met by Ukrainian troops stationed in that region. Zelensky, who predicted that Russia would make such a move, had set up a very serious ambush. Putin, who also returned empty-handed from this attack, is known to have requested an urgent meeting with Belarus. While it is known that Ukraine hosted very big celebrations after this event, this move caused by serious repercussions in the world. It has been valid once again how big below the persistent operations of the Ukrainian army have dealt. But the comments of war analysts offered a different point of view on this issue. According to war analysts, the Ukrainian army needs to create a very large defense line in Kiev in order not to lose this advantage. It has, because the preparation that Russia has made is quite large as it plans to enter as far as Moldova, thanks to the great preparation of Russia in response to this data obtained. It's also among those who are expected to invade Ukraine at once. In other words, if Ukraine neglects to establish a defense line in the necessary places by taking advantage of offensive advantage, the course of the war may change. This situation also allows the Ukrainian army to suffer a very serious loss. Therefore, Zelensky should guarantee Ukraine's victory by continuing the same policies. Next breaking news: a shocking development and war between Russia and Ukraine. Poland, an ally of Ukraine, organized a major operation against the Belarusian and Russian army that was about to attack Ukrainian territory. When we look at the wars throughout human history, we can see that wars have never taken place between two countries. Many states try to turn the war in their favor by finding galleys. This is how this war has continued throughout. We can see examples of this in today's war between Russia and Ukraine. Both countries are trying to minimize their losses in the war by finding allied countries. Russia, which invaded Ukrainian territory on February 24th last year, tried to facilitate its occupation of Ukrainian territory by taking states such as Iran, Syria, and Belarus. However, the number of allied countries on Ukraine's side in this war is much higher. This helped the Ukrainian army to gain strength in a short period of time, and the Russian army, which is much larger than Ukraine and has modern military technology, suffered great losses on Ukrainian soil. This once again shows how important it is to have allies in A. Poland is a very important ally for the Ukrainian army, having provided a lot of assistance to Ukraine since the beginning of the war. Shortly after Russian forces invaded Ukrainian territory, Poland opened its borders for Ukrainian citizens and helped many Ukrainian citizens to flee the war. Not only that, it's offered to send its own thanks to Ukrainian army and mobilize the clear to occupying Russian forces from. While helping the Ukrainian army, Poland is also trying to take measures against Belarus, which has sided with Russia since the beginning of the war. Poland, which is a member of both NATO and the European Union, closed the Belarusian border and started to deploy troops there after the Russian army entered the Ukrainian territory through the Belarusian. That Russian forces and the Belarusian army are a threat to Poland. The Polish authorities have sent a large number of tanks, armored vehicles, and soldiers to the Belarusian border, while at the same time placing barriers and watchtowers on the border. The Polish army monitors every move of the Belarusian army with cameras installed in these watchtowers. While there was no danger for months, the Polish army recently noticed that the Belarusian army started to move. Belarusian and Russian soldiers were planning to form a large army and launch a new attack on Ukrainian territory. The Russian army was planning to attack the Ukrainian city of Lviv by forming a joint unit with Belarusian soldiers. As soon as the Polish authorities learned that the Russian army was attempting to attack Ukraine, they contacted the Ukrainian authorities and VTE Ukrainian. Following this warning, Ukrainian forces were to direct their troops and live towards the Belarusian border. To prevent an offensive through Belarus, the Polish government decided to organize a large-scale operation to prevent the Russian army from attacking from Belarus. The Polish Defense Ministry decided to send the Polish army towards the border with valorous 10,000 Polish troops entered Ukrainian territory and moved towards the Ukrainian city of. The Polish army, which entered the Ukrainian territory with a large number of tanks and armored vehicles, was to support the Ukrainian army to stop the Russian and Belarusian army. The Ukrainian army, which mobilized from the city of Lviv, moved towards the city of Kov, where the Polish army was also located. Ukrainian soldiers could not hide their surprise when they saw Polish soldiers in front of them. Poland, which has been providing military and financial support to Ukraine since the beginning of the war, sent its army to Ukrainian territory for the first More precisely, for the first time, a country allied with Ukraine decided to send its army to Ukraine to fight against Russia. Ukrainian and Polish forces came together and started to advance towards the border with Belarus. Belarusian troops had already entered Ukrainian territory, but they were surprised to see an army of 20,000. The Ukrainian and Polish army sent their tanks ahead and begun firing artillery against the Russian and Belarusian soldier. Ukrainian soldiers begun launching airstrikes with unmanned fighter jets against enemy forces on Ukrainian territory. 5,000 enemy forces were completely helpless against an army of 20,000. The enemy forces who set out to occupy the city of Lye had to flee from Ukrainian territory when they saw the large army against them. Returning back to Belarus, Russian and Belarusian troops decided to cancel the leave. After the repulse of the enemy forces, Ukrainian and Polish soldiers placed mortars and barricades on the Belarusian border to secure the city. The successful repulse of the Ukrainian army received a standing ovation from Ukrainian parliamentary officials. Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky telephoned Polish Prime Minister Moki to thank him for his. Polish officials believe that Russia wants to occupy not only Ukrainian territory, but all of Europe. Many of our analysts also believe that Putin wants to regain his former Soviet power, which is why this invasion will not be limited to Ukraine. That's why the Polish army continues to do its best to end the Russian occupation of Ukrainian territory as soon as. Poland was one of the first countries to approve Ukraine's succession. Tornado NATO, realizing that if Ukraine joins NATO, the NATO army will enter Ukrainian territory and fight against the occupying Russian forces. Poland is one of the countries that wants Ukraine to join NATO. Poland not only sends aid to Ukraine, but also imposes sanctions against Russia. Polish authorities who do not cause difficulties to Ukrainian citizens at the border and accept them all within Polish borders, do not do the same for Russian citizens. Poland, which says it is trying to minimize its trade relations and foreign policy with Russia, has banned Russian citizens from entering Po. Ukraine has many allied states on its side. The Ukrainian army, which had to fight alone at the beginning of the war, received the support of almost all European countries towards the middle of the war. Among the countries that support Ukraine the most are the USA, the UK, France, Turkey, Poland, Germany. Since the beginning of the war, the U.S. administration has sent a large number of weapons, ammunition, armored vehicles, and military equipment such as tanks to the Ukrainian army. In recent weeks, after the U.S. agreed to send Abrams tanks to Ukraine, Germany also took cap action and decided to send Leopard 2 tanks to Ukrainian army. While the U.S. government sent 31 Abrams tanks to the Ukrainian army, Germany decided to send 14 Leopard 2 tanks. The military technology that changed the course of the war was unmanned combat. The Russian army had been conducting airstrikes inside Ukrainian territory by obtaining unmanned fighter jets from its longtime ally Iran. Turkish President Erdogan intervened in this situation and started sending Bayraktar TB2 unmanned fighter jets to the Ukrainian army. Turkey, which has sent a large number of unmanned fighter jets to Ukraine, has also announced that they will establish a Bar unmanned fighter jet production facility in Ukraine. However, the Russian government has stated that if such a facility is established in Ukraine, it'll be destroyed, which Putin, who has good relations with Turkish President Erdogan, dare to shoot down a production facility established by. We will learn the answer to this question in the future.